maybe to reduce some of our stigma, we can really discuss how we got here. Anybody that's heard me talk before has heard the speech of, I don't beat up doctors, I do not beat up our medical community at all. But 30 years ago, remember that chronic pain was coming around as a diagnosis. And doctors were asking you, the pain scale from 1 to 10, tell me what your pain is, because it was determined that these powerful medications could help with chronic pain. And that physicians should be prescribing these powerful medications, your oxycodones, Percocets, and other painkillers to help folks with chronic pain so that they could have a better quality of life. It was only 10 years or so down the road from that we really learned that what happened was people who were on the medications for a long period of time, if they tried to wean off or tried to stop, they learned that they couldn't. So it was really a trust issue from everywhere. We trusted the docs trusted the information they were given. We worked with the doctors worked with us, but the monster was built. And when Pandora's box was opened, we just could not seem to get it all back into the box. So people became addicted to the prescription drugs. Well, let's say dependent on the prescription drugs. And one age group that really hit harder was our older age group. I got to be careful how I use older, but we get the older age group who have been working for years, who may have had injuries. Now, I'm one of those people. I've had multiple injuries, multiple broken bones, multiple surgeries. So I can sympathize and empathize with folks who say they have chronic pain. But for that population of people, this seemed to be something that would work, that you could keep your pain level down and could function as fully as possible. And only in around 2000 or a little after, it was learned that folks had built up a tendency to become dependent or addicted to these medications. So the medications become harder to get. Doctors tried to wean off, or doctors would stop prescribing because they were understanding that, hey, these medications are doing, in some cases, more damage than good. But please understand, these medications are great for folks who are terminally ill, to help keep the pain level down and controlled during end-of-life circumstances. And really, that's what they were made for. But once people realize that, I can't get the prescription that I need to get it from somewhere else. And these prescription medications all of a sudden had a street value. And you saw prescription medications being sold on the street. And it got expensive. But people were doing it. And people were functioning. We heard our DA talk about crime went up. Well, yeah, people were starting to get, needed money for the drug, stealing the drug from relatives or other folks. You would start hearing more stories about people breaking into houses and just going and getting the drugs. And that was also happening here along with nationwide. One of the other problems that we had was just a huge increase in our death rate. The last number we got from last year was almost 70,000 people died from overdose. Most of them unintentional. Please understand, unintentional. They did not mean to do this. They were taking the medication because it started with pain and it evolved to this. So, what hit the street? The illegal drugs. You started seeing an increase in heroin, an increase in fentanyl mixed with heroin, and now it's almost all fentanyl that's on the street. It became cheap, easy to get, and you're seeing more and more of that in the news every day. And in the meantime, we're seeing our numbers start to go up and go up. So, how did we get here? That's a very brief explanation of what's happened over the past 30 years. But I say that because I want that to help reduce the stigma of these are not just someone who got up one morning to decide, I'm going to start taking opioids. They started doing this for no other reason than just to get high. In most cases, that is not the reason. Does it happen? Sure, it's happened. It's been used recreationally. So some age groups, some young folks, feel like they're invincible and can try it. But let me say again, I am a son, I am a father, a husband, a grandfather, and this is going to take a generation to make a change. It is a generational change, meaning it's going to take some time. I've got grandkids, 4 and 6 years old. I would love to see a huge reduction in the stuff on the street and the problem that we have with the opioids before they get up into those impressionable teenage years. It can be done, and I have to believe it will be done, or I wouldn't be sitting here talking about this. Continued education, continued input from the community, continue to bring in the resources that we need to battle this. Understand that sometimes treatment means going outside the county, being open to that, because that's just where the facility is that you need at that particular time. You'll hear more about this as we go along. I hope that this helps. And again, I look forward to talking to you a little more later on in the event.
Welcome. My name is Tracy Stefik, and I'm the Senior Director for Safe Communities at Safe Project. I'm joined today by my colleague, Randy Abbott, who's our Manager of Volunteer Programs, and we're going to be sharing a little bit with you today about the intersection between substance use disorder and stigma, as well as some data and some tools we can all use, not only to combat stigma, but also change the narrative in our communities. So a little bit about Safe Project here. We're a national 501c3 nonprofit organization who's committed to overcoming the addiction epidemic. We were founded in November 2017 by Admiral James and Mary Winnefeld following the loss of their 19-year-old son, Jonathan, to an accidental opioid overdose. Hoping to save more families from the pain, the Winnefelds immediately channeled their grief into action and started Safe Project. And so today we're a team of multidisciplinary experts who use a collaborative, nonpartisan approach working towards achieving safe campuses, safe communities, and safe veterans. And we're actually in the works adding our fourth initiative called Safe Workplaces, focusing on businesses and corporations.
So, as Tracy mentioned, our founders, Admiral Sandy Winnefeld and his wife, Mary, you can imagine as an admiral that things are very organized in a very good way, but there is a strategic effort that has been put forth in a strategy to make a concerted effort to bring an end to stigma and to within our focus areas of safe campuses, safe communities, and safe veterans, and now safe workplaces, to make sure that we're bringing all stakeholders to the table. You can see our 6 lines of operation, which come from that philosophy of making sure that all stakeholders are a part of the effort within each of those focus areas. And you can see the 6 lines of operation here.
So let's talk a little bit about what addiction is and why it occurs. And so addiction itself is a medical illness, a brain disease, but you'll see on the slide there are 3 complex primary factors that can elevate your risk for substance use disorder. And they are biological factors, psychological factors, and social factors. So let's start off with the biological element. The National Institute on Drug Abuse defines addiction as a chronic relapsing disorder characterized by compulsive drug seeking with continued use even despite the harmful consequences and long-lasting changes. And so it's considered both a complex brain disorder and a mental illness. And researchers have even concluded that addictions can change the physical structure of your brain, primarily the prefrontal cortex, which overrides willpower and judgment over time. And so besides the way that addiction fundamentally changes the structure of our brain, there's biological factors as to why substance use disorder occurs. So these are things that are like our genetics, our DNA, hormones, our neurochemicals. They all play a role into whether we are more or less susceptible to substance use disorder. And so a good example of that is how if we have a parent that has substance use disorder, that elevates our risk in turn. But we know as humans, there isn't just one thing that makes up who we are. We are made up of many complex factors. And so there is a psychological component, and this is things like our thoughts or our behaviors and our actions. But there's also a social component. And so from a historical perspective, this might be things that happen to us over the course of our life. So if we had childhood trauma, or how adverse childhood experiences impact us and play a role in our overall health and development. But also the way that our current environment impacts us as well. And so a good example of that is right now with COVID-19 and the pandemic, how we're all sort of facing increased stress and isolation. So really what's difficult about this disease is that it's not tangible. There's not any one of these factors is the same for any one of us. And we don't yet have the technology to measure how any of these factors might impact us like we do for other diseases.
So what do we do? How do we figure all of this out and what the causes are? As Tracy just outlined, there are a lot of factors that play into substance use disorder. One of those is mental health, and you've probably heard the term co-occurring disorders. We know, and the linkage is still not 100% clear, but we know that people with a mental health disorder are more likely to also have a substance use disorder in a lot of cases. So what are the statistics? One point that I always like to point out, because when I heard it the first time, it really, really stuck with me, is that this issue is a pediatric issue. That's the issue of substance use disorders. So what does that mean? That really hit me when the person said that in the meeting I was in. I thought a pediatric issue. How's this a pediatric issue? Well, there's a survey that was done, and 90% of the people who took the survey, and these were people who identified as having a substance use disorder, 90% said they started experimenting with drugs or alcohol in high school. Over 60% started in middle school. So as we start to look at the statistics and we start to develop strategies from those, we know that we have to start prevention younger. Also, the National Survey on Drug Use and Health does a survey every year that kind of measures where we are. Pre-COVID-19, we had seen a significant decrease in opioid use disorder. And despite those gains, overdose deaths had increased, underscoring the risk of potent illicit synthetic opioids. Heroin use among 18 to 25-year-olds had decreased significantly. And then past year marijuana use disorder and past year LSD use significantly increased in adolescents. So we see one thing go down, we see another thing go up. Unfortunately, during COVID-19, we have seen an increase in almost all areas. People have lost access to treatment. Some programs and treatment programs have had to go virtual or quit meeting altogether. So people have lost a lot of those support mechanisms that are out there, making it that much more evident of what we need to do and how we need to move forward through this time.
Thanks, Randy. And I think that this concerning rise that we expect for 2020 is exactly why it's so important that we have the conversation around stigma right now, because we not only need to combat stigma, but we need to work on changing the narrative, focusing on our strengths, promoting acceptance, and shifting as a society toward valuing health and well-being and celebrating recovery. So what does stigma look like in our communities? Really, it's stereotypes and prejudice that result from misconceptions about mental health and substance use disorder. So really, it's twofold. One, there's external or public stigma. These are reactions from the general public, which might also be systemic. But two, there's internal self-stigma, and this is prejudice in which we turn on ourselves. So really what it looks like in our day-to-day can be shaming, isolation, embarrassment, withholding help, avoidance, coercive treatment, segregated institutions, and even discrimination. So it really just comes from the long-lasting inaccurate beliefs, but also creates less willingness for people to seek treatment. And previous studies have even shown that the public has withheld help from some minority groups for a corresponding stigma, and research suggests that being exposed to stigmatizing language over a period of time can affect clinical judgments and quality of care. So people with substance use disorder really are also just generally falsely considered to be more responsible for their condition by the general public, and that has an influence on attitudes and behaviors as well. There's a lot of stereotypes that exist in which depict people with substance use disorder as being more dangerous or unpredictable. And people with substance use disorder often internalize this stigma, feeling shame, and will refuse to seek treatment as a result.
So how does our language play into stigma, and what can we do to change that language and thereby starting to change the stigma that goes along with substance use disorder so often? Well, if we start thinking of using person-centered language, person-first language, and looking at the person first rather than the disorder first. So instead of saying addict or alcoholic, say a person with substance or alcohol use disorder. A former reformed addict or alcoholic, a person in recovery or long-term recovery. Drug abuse, use drug misuse or harmful use. One that you still hear a lot, it's dirty or dirty drug screen. You know, people that are using drugs are not dirty. And that just really further stigmatizes the disease. So person-centered language might be actively using or testing positive for substance use. And there are many, many others. There is online, there's the Addictionary, which you can Google and find, and it gives you many, many examples of languages that we can change to help end stigma.
So something that we're doing that's really cool at Safe Project is the hashtag No Shame Pledge. And it's a way that we're raising awareness to fight stigma. We believe at Safe Project there is no shame in getting help or talking about mental health and addiction. So I'm encouraging all of you to log on to our site and sign our pledge and help us combat the negative perception that is out there, and support others in talking about their own disorders. By signing the pledge, you're helping us to create a nationwide movement. And because we're currently in production to create a map that tracks these pledges and commitments from around the country, it helps us to signal that there is solidarity and create a sense of community, support from all around, especially when we know it's a real time of disconnection and isolation. So number one, I'm challenging you all to be the first in your community to light up North Carolina on the map. And also encouraging you to continue to check on our social media platforms, because we have some really neat prizes and challenges lined up in connection to the pledge coming out. But also, the hashtag No Shame Pledge is something that's a great community organizing tool that can be used to drum up political will and raise awareness in your own community about how you're combating stigma. And something that can be used as a catalyst to drive social impact and help change behaviors in the community at scale. So for this purpose, we've actually developed a social media toolkit to help communities get the word out and replicate the campaign locally. The toolkit has a downloadable flyer, a news brief about the campaign, graphics, and even sample social media posts that are all prepackaged, out of the box, and ready for your community to use. And so if you do use these materials for a local campaign, what I would say is just make sure you tag us at Safe Project US on social media. And also we'd love to share, see any of news articles that are highlighting your work in action. So we're really excited to see what you do with it.
So what are some other resources? Probably the number one thing we hear from families that are dealing with a family member with a substance use disorder is where to start. Where do I begin? How do I find treatment? How do I find treatment that's right? So we created the SAFE project, SAFE Locator, and you can go to the SAFE Locator at the link on the slide, answer a few questions about your particular situation, and that will populate a list of potential treatment centers that meet that criteria. And I say potential treatment centers because we do encourage you to always vet fully the treatment centers that are in that list, and to make sure that they do indeed fit your particular situation and your needs. We're also in the process of developing the National Family Support Locator, which will be the first of its kind. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's going to be a list of things that families can turn to and places that families can turn to find resources. We need your help with that. Sorry, dogs, I love them. So we need your help with that. If you could go to the link here and let us know what's going on in your community. What are the resources that are there, and encourage those resources to fill out the survey. That would be great. And then there's our community playbook. So the community playbook is exactly maybe what it sounds like. Maybe it doesn't. It's a playbook or a roadmap or a guide, if you will, to get a community coalition up and running, make sure that they bring the right stakeholders to the table and know how to organize and how to get going to make the most impact.
So wrapping it up today, Randy and I both want to extend our sincere thanks for having us. If you have any questions, our contact information is available on the slide. We're here at any time. Thanks again.
Hello, my name is Robert Hassel, and I'm the Chief of Police for the City of Reedsville Police Department. The opioid crisis. We hear about it on the news, and we know that the opioid overdoses has not only affected us across our country and across our state, but it has affected us right here at home, here in Reedsville and Rockingham County. You know, people who are addicted to drugs and opioids, there's many factors that go into that, whether it's prescriptions that have been overprescribed, whether these are illicit drugs that someone may be addicted to. The problem at the end of the day is the same. We are having a high number of overdoses across our county. Over the last 3 years, we have seen these numbers increase year after year across the state and here at home. So what are we thinking we need to do about that? Well, what we have done is we have looked at creating our post-overdose response team, better known as PORT. Over the last several years, our enforcement efforts have done a good job in eradicating drugs, locations, and those providers of those drugs to our citizens. But PORT was a different approach. It's more than just enforcement. We're not going to arrest our way out of this crisis. PORT is designed to ensure that we get our healthcare providers, our service providers, to the individuals who need help. So with PORT, what we have done is that a service provider working with our local police department will respond to every person who has been a victim of some kind of overdose. That response will typically happen between 48 and 72 hours, where a healthcare provider will, what we call a cold contact. They will reach out to the individual by going to their, where they live, and see if they wish to get more help from one of our providers here in Rockingham County. Hopefully that individual will accept that help. It's not something that we forcibly push on the individual, but we do come with all the information they need if they wish to go that route. It is our goal to make contact with every person who is suffering, because that's what this is. It's an addiction, and these individuals are suffering from that addiction, and it affects more than just them. It affects their family, their loved ones, their friends. It affects our community as a whole. So Port is looking to try to make a difference. We want to see our numbers go down as it relates to overdoses. Even if it's just one or two or just a few individuals that seek help, those are individuals that are now on the path of recovery. And I think that is a success. This new approach here in Reedsville, the Post-Overdose Response Team, better known as PORT, was a pilot program. It's an initiative to give help to those who are suffering from addiction. We know this crisis is not just centered here in Reedsville. We're experiencing this across all areas of Rockingham County. So hopefully over the next several months of our team responding to those who need help, we will see much success. And that success can then spread across Rockingham County, where we can deliver the same type response to other individuals across our county who need help. Also, we have implemented initiatives that get information into those who need it. Our officers have information packets. These information packets are given to every individual that may be experiencing some kind of addiction. When these packets are given to the individual or family or loved one after an incident, that is an opportunity for that person to seek help. After they get the packet, they review the information, they can either contact one of the service providers that's in the packet, or they could come down to the Reedsville Police Department and seek additional information, and we will make sure that we connect that person with an appropriate service provider for that person. Our family. Anytime we have a person within our family who is suffering, and what we're talking about today is the opioid crisis and addiction. It hurts everyone. It hurts our loved ones, it hurts our family, and I know it's hard. It's hard for you to see a loved one who is suffering with this addiction, but there is help, and you're not alone. If you have a family member who is suffering from addiction, there is help right here in Rockingham County. Please reach out to the Reedsville Police Department or the Rockingham County Opioid Task Force or the Post-Overdose Response Team Coordinator. We're here to help you. You are not alone. I know the struggle seems long and I know it's hard, but there are many individuals, many organizations and resources that are here just for you to help you and your family member get through this. So please, if you have a family member who is suffering from addiction, reach out to any one of our service providers and we will be here to assist you.
Today I've got B.J. Kuhn with me, who is a ministry leader in this and a state rep. I just want you today to take some time and educate me on, and the community on Celebrate Recovery. What is it all about? How do people get involved?
Celebrate Recovery is a 12-step program. What sets us apart is that we are biblically based, so there is scripture involved. Each step has a scripture with it. We also practice the 8 principles, which are the 8 Beatitudes from the Bible, which are simply characteristics to live by, moral values, walking in integrity. Celebrate Recovery is also set apart because we are not we're not confined to only addiction. Primarily who we see are people with addiction. Our personal ministry has grown significantly beyond that because it's for all hurts, habits, and hang-ups. And so divorce, anger, theft, problems with lying, pride problems, just needing an extra meeting or group to attend for support every week. We encourage people when they come, you'll see sitting here all of our chips. We encourage people when they come to pick up the blue chip, which is where their journey begins. And so we've had people come through and pick up multiples of those because maybe they were struggling with alcoholism and they came and stopped drinking, and now they realize anger's what sent them into that spiral. And so now they need to pick up another blue chip because they need to work on their anger problem. And maybe the anger came from a divorce or an affair that themselves or their spouse had. And so they can also work through that area as well. We are an open group. We do a large group meeting which combines males and females, but then we separate off into open share groups so that we can do, so we have a chemical dependency group and we have an A to Z group, which chemical dependency is people that struggle with addiction. The A to Z group is for everything else that people may struggle with. And we have those separated per gender so people can be comfortable to share openly. We also, and so that meeting happens here at Osborne Baptist Church on Sunday nights. We have dinner at 5 o'clock, worship at 5:30, and our large group meeting starts at 6 o'clock, which typically entails 1 week we will have a lesson, so that's going to be based on the 12 steps. And the next week we have a testimony, and those vary as well. This past week we had the testimony of a young man that had been military. That's how he got clean. He didn't go to a program, he went to the military. We've had testimonies from people who got addicted because they went into the military. So he talked a lot about his PTSD when he shared his testimony this week. Phenomenal testimony, but worked the 12 steps to get there. We also have step study on Thursdays here at Osborne, one group for women, one group for men, and that meets at 6:30, and it is an open group, and it takes you through the 12 steps individually with a facilitator. I facilitate the women's group on Thursdays currently, and Rob Robbins, who is a counselor here at Osborne Baptist, facilitates the men's group. And he's available, so I'll go ahead and give his number if that's okay.
Sure.
At 336-344-6064, and provide some counseling through the church. He's available to answer questions about Celebrate Recovery. He is the on-site representative for our Celebrate Recovery ministry, and so if anybody has questions on how to get involved, they can also call him. We have need for sponsors, and so I typically encourage people get into a step study because we have real specific requirements for leadership. We want to make sure that people get the support they need and that they get it from healthy people. And so we do provide sponsorship through Celebrate Recovery, which is somebody to help walk someone through the 12 steps. Our sponsors are trained. We, if somebody wants to be a sponsor and has a significant amount of time in recovery, we would love for them to come and get involved and provide sponsorship to some of our ladies and gentlemen. We also provide, so I talked about the beginning chip. We also have one for every month so that people can celebrate monthly, and we do that celebration every Sunday. And then we have this nice heavy metal chip when people start getting multiple years. I will pick up a 14-year chip in August of this year, or coin, because it becomes a coin once you get past multiple years, for chemical dependency, but have a blue chip on my key ring for other hurts, habits, and hang-ups that I'm currently working through.
And we all have those.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, if anybody out there thinks that you don't have some kind of a hang-up, if you want to minimize it to that, we all have that.
That's right.
So these types of programs, it's great, because what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you go where the person is.
That's right.
Because again, when I hear, to bring it down to me in the community, is if you help someone with their addiction and you can help them get into a program, all their other problems will just, everything will fall together for that individual, for lack of a better way of putting it. And I tell them, that's not necessarily true. You got to go where the person is at the time.
That's right.
Because if a person comes in and says, anger issue, housing issue, I want a job, food.
That's right.
Just something simple. If you're looking at Maslow's hierarchy here,
That's right.
of where the person is, that's where you've got to meet the person and start working from there. So I like this because it doesn't go from just, you know, bang, bang, bang. You can go backwards and forwards and work with different issues. So, you know, yeah, great, you've taught me something today about the whole program, which is what we're here for anyway.
We also have, in addition to the adult group, you mentioned meeting people where they are, and so part of what has been attempted, I know, on everybody's part with the opioid epidemic is prevention.
Right.
And so we have a children's program and a teenage program. The Children's Place and the Landing are provided for children and teenagers to go through the 12 steps, but they go through it on their level, and so they're not in there talking about drugs and alcohol and all of that stuff. They're going through the exact same lessons we're going through on an age-appropriate level. I myself was incarcerated. I hear people talk about jailhouse religion. Hey, if somebody finds it there and they get the resources they need there, then that's wonderful, because that's what happened for me. I'd lived a really, really hard childhood. My mother was an addict. My daddy was an alcoholic. And we experienced all the ramifications of that. Swore I would never be that. I would never be like either of them. And in my teen years, got into an abusive relationship with someone, and married that man in my early 20s. Had my second daughter, which was my third child. And directly after that, he wouldn't stay home. He was a narcissist. He was constantly on the go. And one day I went with him, and my addiction there began with cocaine. And you know, it took me down a road that there was a point that he was asking me to get money for us and asking me to get him high. And there was a point when I decided, if I'm gonna do it for us, I'm just gonna do it for me. And I left home. I left my kids with what I felt like was good care. Was not the right thing to do. I'm very remorseful for that. Praise God, he has delivered me and really given me the tools to stay clean, and have built those relationships back with my children. And currently going to have a baby in May.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And so I had to go to a long-term program. There was a lady that just took special calls with me in the jail, and I know sometimes it seems fruitless to people that go and do this jail ministry or counseling inside the jail, because they're watching these ladies come back in, and she watched me come back in several times but never gave up on me. And so this last time I was incarcerated, which was in 2006, she gave me a book that really explained to me what my issue was, a Bible, and the opportunity to get some help. So she started calling some different programs. There was one in Greensboro that she found for me that was long-term, and I went there. It was a 9-month at the time, 9-month Christ-centered program. We worked the 12 steps to Celebrate Recovery. I started Celebrate Recovery back then in 2006, and graduated that program 2007. My children came back 2008, and life has just been phenomenal, but I've had to continue to work these steps and to use the coping that was given to me. I can say that now I don't feel like I'm bound by my addiction, but I have a whole lot of hurts, habits, and hang-ups that I'm continuously healing from and discovering about myself. And so I utilize this program. So not only am I a leader because I want to help other people, I'm a leader because I need it as much as the next person does. And so I'm really compassionate when people walk in for the first time.
So this is a cognitive behavioral change.
It is, absolutely.
And it's not just for you, it's for everyone around you.
Absolutely.
So you and that has to be learned also.
That's right.
You know, you just don't drop somebody off and come back and everything's better. It takes a lot of time. And I do appreciate you, whether you realize you said it or not, that it took multiple times to get you involved into something. Someone did not give up on you.
That's right.
And that's the big thing with the stigma in the community that we want people to understand. This is tough to get over.
Amen.
And to make that first step. I hear people say, you know, I'm just giving up. It's just not working. Well, you haven't got in the right program yet. There's different philosophies out there. There's different treatments. You got to find what works.
That's
It
right.
is out there. This may not be it. I like what I see here, but if this is not for you, then we've already talked about a couple of other treatment facilities and outpatient treatment facilities. We've talked about you can get into inpatient treatment.